Hi there. Welcome to Supportive Information Session. So I thank you for spending your morning or afternoon or whatever time you might be kind of tuning in. So today's topic is mindfulness and self-care, and I'll be taking you through some slides and some information around that specifically, and what a perfect opportunity to do so given sort of the current circumstances related to COVID-19. So really excited to be able to do this virtually with you. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Val. I'm one of the heart space counselors within Addiction Services of Thames Valley. And so we'll be spending the next 50 or 60 minutes together today. I will kind of note that I'm navigating two screens, one for my notes and then one specific to the slide deck here. So bear with me. Okay. Let's begin. So one piece that I would like to share is, if not yet connected with services and wanting to do so, I highly encourage you to call the intake lines. And so they're operating daily from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And able to do so at our main extension at extension 222. Just for kind of information or support or not really knowing how to get connected. In regards to current individuals who are connected with our services, and again, intake extension 281, family members who might be needing some support or just kind of want to kind of identify what's been going on and gain some feedback, by all means, call extension 221. And then specific to withdrawal, in terms of our connecting with our team of nurses, the Community Withdrawal Support Program at extension 248, as well as the Rapid Access to Medicine Clinic at extension 281. So a variety of different resources that are available, okay? With that said, if you don't remember what extension, there is sort of prompts that become available. So just call in and listen to those prompts. So additional supports that are still operating within this time of COVID-19 is always the reach out line. So reach out is 24/7 at all hours of the day or night or whenever in regards to seeking support. So there's two options in regards to a web chat, if that feels a little bit better and safer for you, or via phone. So all that information is there, as well as sort of the support line. So the support line, it navigates some options, okay? So during COVID-19, some ways that you might be able to better protect yourself in terms of your health and your wellness. So it is sort of an illness that affects your lungs and respiratory system. So COVID kind of 19, short form for coronavirus 2019. And so encouraging everyone, when possible, to frequently wash their hands for at least 20 seconds, or using a hand sanitizer or some other sort of disinfectant that way to really remove the dirt if you're not able to fully scrub and wash down. So if you are feeling unwell, encouraging you to stay home. And so symptoms might include cough, fever, difficulty breathing, and so being mindful that sort of the parameters that have been set is to keep a 6-foot sort of distance or radius from another individual in terms of minimizing the spread, okay? And so kind of better known as social distancing. And then if you're unsure, what symptoms might look like, or kind of needing to inquire a little bit more, please see the free self-assessment options at that website there through Public Health. Okay. All right. So a grounding exercise is something that we engage in every time we do an SIS. And so grounding is really, the purpose is to help calm the mind, the body, and to really be able to focus in a way that is relaxed in order to improve our inner sense of self-awareness, support our mental health, and any sort of physical changes that are going on within our body. So typically when I run this SIS, I stand sort of at the back of the room just in order for individuals to feel safe, supported, and getting comfortable when I facilitate a grounding. So actually what I might do is maybe step aside for a moment so you can only hear my voice in facilitating that. So I encourage you to find a space within your home or wherever you're watching it to really be able to be, whether it might be sitting on the floor, sitting on a chair, maybe back against the wall, and whatever feels the safest for you. If you would like to close your eyes, be more than comfortable to do so. But I'm just going to step away for a moment and then come back in about 2 minutes after facilitating. Okay. Get your bodies into a comfortable position. Your feet might be planted on the ground, hands comfortable in your lap. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. Take a moment to breathe in deeply and exhale. Do this as many times as you feel necessary. Knowing at any point you can always return to your breath. Take note of how your body feels. To not let any sort of judgment be present, but just being mindful, tuning in, and letting any thoughts go when they come up. Encouraging you to unfurl your brow, increasing a sense of calmness over your face, and any tension that you might be holding. Maybe let your tongue drop from the roof of your mouth, and let your jaw hang heavy. Again, noticing any sensations that might be going on and being present, and letting them pass. Next, take note of your head and shoulder muscles. We carry a lot of stress and tension in this area of our body. So encouraging you, if you feel comfortable to do so, to maybe slowly rotate your head in a circular fashion. Really slowly. And then the opposite way. And maybe if it feels good to rotate your shoulders as if you're touching your ears and back towards your back of the room or towards your back. And then maybe pulling them forward, giving a nice little stretch. As you sit deeper into your chair or to your seat, what do you notice? What has shifted for you since you entered this SIS? Taking note of how your feet feel supported on the ground, knowing that you are in fact grounded and connected to the earth and environment around you. As you move forward with your deep breaths and any thoughts that come up, let them be present and return back. I encourage each person to maybe set an intention, whether the intention was to tune in to this SIS this morning. You've achieved that. And so before we come to an end, as you're thinking of your intention and how you want to start your day or end your day, hold that with you, to encouraging you to think happy, pleasant, and enjoyable thoughts about yourself. And as you transition from maybe a peaceful, relaxing state, to not rush the process, to slowly count backwards from 10 to 1, and then at 1, to open your eyes and return back to the space. So welcome back. My hope is that you're able to kind of disconnect for a moment and kind of calm and quiet the body and any sensations or thoughts in your mind that may have come up, even if it was for a period of 30 seconds. And that this practice in terms of grounding can really help in terms of our mental, our emotional, behavioral, physical selves in tuning in. Okay. So today's topic is mindfulness and self-care. And like I said earlier, I think it's a perfect opportunity to really learn how can we take better care of ourselves during this time and be mindful in doing so. So we will spend the next little bit sort of shifting our focus a little bit in terms of being able to better adapt to stressors and focusing inward. Okay. So typically SIS is a non-sharing group, and recognizing it's kind of a one-way information session today. But when you think of self-care, mentally think about what comes to mind for you, or what does self-care mean? And so oftentimes when we think of self-care, we think of the capacity to play or to connect in terms of socially or interpersonally with family and close relationships. Might be in terms of our nutrition and eating well and eating right for our bodies. Getting restful sleep or creating a sense of routine in regards to our sleep. Or physical exercise, of being active and getting our bodies moving. And so these are some examples of ways that we can engage in self-care that have been meaningful to you. And so breaking down the word a little bit further of self-care, meaning the person or the being, and distinguishing ourselves from others. And so care identifies a plan that's put into place, necessary for our health, our welfare and maintenance, and recognizing my self-care might be very much different from another person's. And so it's a way to look after yourself and the things that keep you well and keep you happy. And so it speaks to everyone's uniqueness. and really whatever healthy approach you might look at. And so if we think of, recovery and addiction, again, our plans and our treatment plans might look a little bit different. So kind of thinking about that a little bit when we go through our presentation today. And so why is self-care important, and why do we hear and talk about it oftentimes within our treatment plans? Is one way that it's supportive is that it increases our self-esteem and it makes us feel good about ourselves, really reaffirming the right that we have the responsibility to care for ourselves and love ourselves, in that our needs are important. Oftentimes, we might not recognize the importance of our needs, that we might put things aside or minimize the importance and kind of oftentimes care for others in not an issue or not a problem, or kind of quite easily. But then on the flip of that, how does that impact ourselves? And so recognizing that allows people to live full lives and work towards their goals and dreams, spending less time being ill and more time enjoying our lives and ourselves. And so with that said, it helps prevent lapse or relapse towards past behaviors or problematic behaviors that we're better able to understand when we are unhealthy, what contributing factors did that look like, or what was maybe the reasons behind it, and dig in a little bit deeper, and then create a plan around, when I maybe was not eating right, that decreased my mood and had me very irritable, and then with irritable came emotions, and those emotions triggered a different response, and then maybe a return to past behavior. So the work is, maybe it's changing the way that we're consuming our food, or whatever that looks like. So tailoring it to help prevent and get a better understanding, to reduce the risk of using alcohol and other drugs as a means to cope. Okay, so practicing self-care. So one of the most important things that we can do is to be able to better care for ourselves, but that in itself can be challenging at times. And so what I would encourage you to look at is maybe to consider the reasons why might be using or have used historically, to deal with those situations, those feelings, those people and places, and so on. And so some people might identify using as a means to cope or escape or relax or to reward themselves. So in order to be a better care for ourselves, with that said, we need to become aware of our needs and what our wants or desires are. And allowing this awareness to kind of be at the forefront, then we're able to make better decisions. So the idea that when we know more, we can do better. When we have the information, we can learn from those experiences and move forward and kind of highlight, the last time this happened, this was my response. What's something different? How can I interrupt that sort of not so good behavior from occurring? And so learning why we use, or recognizing why we used, can help us deal with our emotions, strategize more healthy ways to cope, and allow us to start to address those sort of deeper rooted situations, or oftentimes you might refer to kind of what's underneath the iceberg of that internal piece of what we're going through, versus the tip of the iceberg of what people see in relation to using or gaming or gambling, or again, whatever behavior that might be. So one way to kind of practice and to tune in is I call like personal check-ins. So this might be at the very forefront of the day, or upon waking up, of, how am I feeling this morning? And you feel it in your body. Oftentimes your body responds way quicker than our mind might respond. And so might feel that tightness in our bellies or that tension in our neck and shoulder muscles. And so that might be a flag of why am I feeling the tension in my hands or sweating or some of those symptoms. So an opportunity to check in with ourselves, of having that internal dialogue or that inner self-talk of what's going on. And one way to do this in terms of a tool or a handout is HALT. And so my hope is that the attachments to some resources will be provided in this SIS or online. So HALT stands for, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And so these are internal check-ins. You know, when I'm hungry, how do I respond? How do I behave? When I'm angry or anxious, what does that look like? Same with loneliness or disconnection, and then the tired piece around sleep. And so oftentimes, these are ways to get in touch with our feelings, get in touch with our needs and our necessities to be well. And so when you know how you're feeling, you're able to make those better choices and take appropriate action. I might be feeling irritable because I haven't eaten today, or I didn't get restful sleep. And so maybe it's taking a 30-minute nap if it's at all possible, and seeing how that shifts in terms of how you wake up feeling a little bit better, a little bit more rested. And so part of recovery is really tuning into or paying attention to those internal signals that are going on, those feelings that I talked about within ourselves, and to practice appropriate way to meet your needs in order to resolve issues in a manner that will enhance our goals, whatever those goals might look like for you. So I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself here. So when you become too angry, anxious, hungry, lonely, or tired, might seek relief from alcohol, drugs, or whatever behavior that might be. And so oftentimes, you know, I have individuals share, I don't know kind of what happened. I just kind of, you know, went out and purchased and may have used. And so backtrack a little bit. What was going on through the day? Oftentimes, substance use as is a form of coping or dealing with certain things. And so what was the piece that might be missing? You know, was it an argument? And that argument maybe turned to feelings of loneliness, and that loneliness had you feeling disconnected. And so one way to connect might be going out and talking with others, or going out and using and having that peace feel fulfilled. And so kind of rewinding the tape a little bit to kind of identify what was the triggering point in order to have a plan in place, a prevention plan, if you will, for next time or future. And so learning to tune into these signs can be, in fact, very difficult. However, make note, if you will, or if you can, around maybe the most frequent places, situations that you might have those symptoms that we talked about, trying to adjust our bodies in a variety of different change, different rituals, different routine. It's really an overall learning curve. However, it can have some substantial outcomes in terms of getting to know yourself a little bit better. And I think that's the biggest piece that oftentimes recovery can offer, is getting to know you and redefining what that might look like, of creating a plan. So when thinking of new rituals or ways to engage in self-care, there's a variety of different models, and so by no means is this an encompassing list, but if you think about, as I go through examples of these, to maybe see if you adapt or really like what those models can offer, and then encouraging you to do your own research to adapt these as a part of your plan, or taking little snippets from each to really make something that works holistically for you. So when we think of the yin and yang, is that light within darkness, and sort of the dualities. And so really identifying opposite or contrary sort of forces are complementary, is that they are supportive to one another. So whether it is the light and the dark, or the fire and water, so it's thought of physical manifestations around those interconnections. And so then moving towards the body with the chakras, or with the different colors at different points within ourself. This is an opportunity to identify that our bodies have different energy points, or different places that hold and center energy flow within. And so I won't go through each one, but identifying at the very base in the red color there around the root chakra. So represents our foundation of being grounded and being centered at the base of our spine, and then moving forward throughout our body towards the crown chakra, in terms of fully being connected with ourselves. So tuning into our emotional, our spiritual, our physical body and connection, what that looks like. So oftentimes I kind of explain in a way that, if I'm thinking around the light blue around the throat chakra there, if I have an inability to speak, or sort of really stumbling over my words, and I kind of say it like that lump in the throat that I'm needing to clear, is that maybe that there's some energy there in connection to a place that, when I come into a certain space and I'm having that lump in the throat, that might be that flag for me, or that signal or warning sign for me. Or if it's around a certain person, what does that look like, that I'm having those sort of responses. So it's really an opportunity to break down where certain pieces within our bodies have different reactions, and how to encourage the energy flow. Okay, so the medicine wheel, it really symbolizes the interconnection of life. So different cycles of mind, body, spirit, emotion. Can also think of it in terms of 4 parts to the person in that regard. Other examples are a compass in terms of north, east, west, south, different seasons. So the hope is to represent life as a circular journey, whether it's connection to nature, our bodies, just representing many, many things. And so 4 points are really sort of a guide, symbolizing different stages in our life, or different stages within our journey. So encourage, in terms of looking at recovery, how these different areas of our life can grow, or how we can create a plan to improve those different aspects. So the Wicca symbol, that the star there, it's a little bit difficult to see, but it talks about sort of the different elements and the interconnection between those elements, and how the spirit really encompasses and thrives when everything is in harmony, or when it is in fact connected. And then lastly, the sort of the Trinity symbol there is Christian and Celtic origin, again around the idea of unity and togetherness. So thinking of, I encourage you to kind of think of those models and take with you what you will from maybe each and every one, or really kind of hone in on the one and felt really kind of connected to that kind of model, and seeing how it can be adapted to your own plan. And we'll talk about this later in a handout or homework to kind of take away, or when you do meet with your one-to-one counselor, if you're connecting with services, that can be introduced and incorporated in. So self-care includes 4 main categories. So this might be our physical, might be our mental, or social, emotional, or spiritual. And so it's a way to get back in touch with various areas, but also to rediscover some interests and recreate ourselves in a positive way of things. You know, I always wanted to go and engage in a pottery class, and how that might connect with you emotionally and socially and spiritually, and so on and so forth. So this is an opportunity to create wellness for yourself. So the first piece is around physical health. So physical health really looks at our basic needs first. So proper nourishment, and in terms of our basic needs around healthy foods or healthy meals, water, appropriate sleep, and then exercise. And so it's important to note that just as our body is unique, so are the ways that you have to kind of take care of them. So I mentioned that earlier, you know, each person's idea is different of what that looks like for them, but to not kind of minimize, like there's no right or wrong way. So I might engage in physical exercise through yoga. Yoga might not be a benefit or supportive to another individual. They might run. And so those are some examples where we can, it's very much a spectrum of support. So oftentimes the piece I want to kind of mention around sleep is that sleep becomes an important part of our recovery process, as you know, we may have deprived our bodies of the level of sleep required to feel rested and to feel well, and so help it make us feel energized for the day. And so if we are using, we might notice that we might be staying up for longer periods than intended to, or using to help go to sleep. And so with that said, it impacts how our bodies rest in regards to the substance within our system. And so bedtime routines might be an appropriate way to start to look at that, is sleep at night and go to bed at the same time, and upon waking up to help deal with those cravings of or urges to in fact use. And so with the piece around the physical exercise, when we are engaged in physical exercise, it increases natural feel-good emotions, or endorphins, euphoric feelings in our brain, and so this can often be a form of coping or distraction that can be supportive in dealing with those urges that might come up. And so exercise and movement, I often say, you know, engage. It doesn't even have to be like an hour workout session. If you were to take a moment and to walk around the block, or maybe not a moment, but 5 minutes to kind of walk around the block to distract and disconnect that thought and engage in a different activity that can help us create a sense of meaning and purpose and minimize the potential time of use. So I often give the analogy of a car. And so a car might look great when it's sort of sitting in the driveway, and when it's kind of there, we might fantasize and say, oh, like that's a beautiful looking car. But for it to be able to run and operate, it needs natural maintenance. It needs to be filled with fuel. And so the idea is that we hope to fuel our bodies with good fuel in order for it to run and thrive, to have our journey be enjoyable and more possible in that. So some approaches. There might be many options to maintaining physical health and wellness, depending on, you know, your own individual needs and abilities and beliefs, interests, so on and so forth. But encouraging you to explore different options. If one doesn't work, that's okay. To kind of move forward and choose another route. That's one of the lovely things, is that there, like I said, there is no right or wrong. If yoga doesn't work, what's another alternative? If running doesn't work, okay, how can I engage? Okay. So another piece is around our mental health or intellectual needs. And so thinking about self-care as a way of taking care of our mental health. If our mental well-being is not well, how does that translate to different life areas? So our brain is super complex, kind of like a machine that needs regular maintenance. We need to kind of reroute and create new pathways. And so one of the beautiful things around the brain is that it's neuroplastic, is that it has an opportunity to change and rewire and create new pathways that better support your well-being, and fizzle out those not so good pathways. So in order to do so, we need to kind of recognize mental stimulation, stress management, of how those impacts of stress are not so supportive to our minds, creating an idea to set goals and internal dialogue and internal self-talk. And so one piece that might be important to kind of look at, or helpful to look at, is the idea of addiction in the brain. It's an SIS that kind of talks about those inner workings, but kind of to recognize the best way to monitor what you're thinking is to really be able to identify your thoughts. When you find that your mind is racing or consumed with negative thoughts or things that aren't serving you well, often what's been helpful is to visualize a stop sign. And so encouraging our minds to stop. Maybe it's engaging in natural grounding and breath, and to sometimes say it out loud. It's like, stop, you know, that thought is not serving me well. It's not allowing me to move forward. And so instead of internalizing it and having it going constant, when we name it, it's giving it less power. It's putting it out there, or writing it down. So to practice a reframe or a positive affirmation to help a more positive counter thought in terms of what's being presented. And so one example of this is this statement right here is, you know, I am nowhere, or I am now here. Same wording, way different meaning. So noticing the negative thought of like, I am nowhere, there is no movement, and that we can get sort of looped into that negative spiral of things that aren't serving us well. Or I am now here. I made it here today, you know, despite the challenges, despite other things that are going on. And so this statement, the latter statement, offers a sense of compassion versus minimizing our efforts on the previous notion. So that's one way that we can engage in the idea of reframing, is renaming what's kind of being brought up for us. So our perception and how we perceive things to be can really impact our mental health and our mood, which then in turn might limit us going out and decreasing socialization and isolation and those sorts of things. So instead of allowing your thoughts to gravitate maybe to the past, to things that didn't serve you well, or I should have, or I could have, or I wish, recognize and put our minds to an awareness to the present, to help ground and appreciate yourself for this moment. It's like, you know, I didn't do that one thing that I wanted to yesterday, but I have an opportunity today to do so, right? And so similar words has such different meaning and impact to ourselves overall. So another way to encourage supportive mental health practices would be to, so I talked about becoming maybe present, focus, and centering on awareness to now, but letting go of the past and letting go of sort of the future, of recognizing that that's kind of the future is outside of our control. And so what I have and able to do is take note of what I can offer today or in this moment, and recognizing that our breath is always there. It's automatic. It serves us without an idea that it's happening. And so taking a moment to slow down, and knowing that even actually when I just did that, my voice shifted, my body, I noticed a shift in how I was sitting. So trying not to change anything, but just noticing sometimes is way important. And so as the mind might wander or go back to those past experiences or things, gently bring yourself back with the breath, and treating yourself with that love and the compassion. And I often say, speak to yourself as if you were talking to a friend. That oftentimes we're so open and able to kind of be supportive to another person, but then when we talk about ourselves, it doesn't come so naturally. So maybe shifting or reframing that of, I am going to treat myself with kindness today as if I was a friend. So letting go, when I talk about minimizing the future or control for the future and then the past, is, you know, the inability to let go is often a first sign of stress. And so stress can be felt in various different ways, but when we're holding on to that energy, again, we feel it everywhere. We feel it in our mind, we feel it in our body, our emotions. And so not wanting things to be different, but just being okay with how they are. And so there's serenity prayer as an option to kind of really tune in and create acceptance for the impermanence, and that recognizing that things will pass. And so learning from the experiences to do things differently next time. And so not being too harsh on ourselves for how we handle the situation, but knowing that, you know, next time I'm in an argument with someone that really kind of upset me, this is how I might respond a little bit differently, or this is what I might do, or a better way to communicate for me instead of in person might be via text, whatever that looks like. And so I had a video, but only for the purposes of the virtual information session topic. It was kind of removed, but it was, if anyone remembers, the Lion King. And so one of, oh my gosh, now I'm forgetting the monkey's name. It's gone. But either way, the monkey kind of bumped one of the lions on the head with a little stick, and the response was like, "Ouch! What did you do that for?" And he had said, you know, the past can hurt, but how we can kind of deal is either run from it or learn from it. And so when he swung his kind of stick again towards the lion's head, the lion dodged it. And so he's like, you know, it was a joke's like, aha, you know, you recognized it, you learned from the past. And so kind of recognizing that absolutely it's not minimizing that the past doesn't have an impact of who we are, how we perceive things and handle, but what we can offer is an opportunity to do things a little bit differently in the future in terms of our healing journey, and taking the steps to do so with support, tuning into what our body needs and how to go about doing it. So I just thought that was a cute little parallel there. All right. So 2 modes of our mind. One of those things is doing things externally. So externally focused is really focusing on the busyness, problem solving, critical thinking, you know, those options. And then the being in terms of internal, of meditation, of playing, of relaxing, of connection. And so we need time for both. That this is, you know, in order to be thinking of a holistic perspective, the idea of busy and problem solving and doing, we are lacking on the flip side, maybe of the yin and yang of that duality of we need time to rest, we need time to heal, to relax and be well. So thinking about the topic around options of self-care, how do we engage in that mindfulness? So really, mindfulness is focusing our attention and what we're doing with intention, not just doing it to do something, but to really be present during that process and paying attention to those experiences with openness, with curiosity, and then letting go of the judgment or fears and control of needing particular outcomes. So being mindful in things that we do can create a state of calmness, of steadiness of the mind, and ability to be flexible and adapt to certain unexpected situations or stressors within our life. So when we practice this, we're able to take a step back, and instead of reacting, maybe able to calmly kind of play things out by shifting our attention, by shifting our focus. And so, you know, clear intention, and I think I said this at the beginning of the grounding, is, you know, leaving the SIS or leaving the grounding, thinking of an intention for the day, because we want to be in fact mindful in the things that we're doing and the steps that we're taking as a way to invite a present experience to be supportive and add quality to our lives and be in control within the options that we choose. So just different examples or comments of ways that you can live fully and be present. And so observing or creating a sense of sort of centeredness, meditation, and focusing on our energy and breath, and offering sense of kindness and patience. So, I mean, again, spectrum of what that might look like for each and every person, but in sense of harmony and balance. Okay, and so what can mindfulness offer? What's it helpful for? So to reduce our stress is one way. To offer a reduction in pain management, addictions, anxiety or depression, in terms of trauma and eating disorders. And so mindfulness practices has been around or available for like 30 centuries, or I don't even know if that's correct, but centuries. And so, you know, really recognizing over the last little bit, it's grown quite rapidly in terms of the practices, and that there's a lot of ways that it can be beneficial to help with a variety of, doesn't even have to be disorders in terms of diagnosis, but just our own mental health. And so there are a variety of different free apps that are available if you have access to a smartphone, or even if you just go on YouTube through a desktop and kind of put in headphones, and there's scripts that are available to just listen to calming voices or noises or rain trickling. So one of the options I think is Calm app, which is free. And then of course YouTube and different, there's also Headspace that's been really heard a lot of positive feedback around. And so if those options might not be available in regards to the technology piece, some practices that you can really do anywhere that don't need any tech is, you know, that inner self check that I talked about, that body scan, taking mindful practices inward, mindfully seeing, and so taking a moment to really kind of look, maybe what's around you, navigating to the space, tuning into things that you might not have before. And so I gave the idea or the example, you know, in terms of my commute to work or my walk to work, there's often times that I hit on the same path or walking the same way. And I had never noticed sort of this engraving or carving within the sidewalk or ground, and I was like, this has to be new, but it clearly wasn't, because the sidewalk has been sealed with cement for some time. But anyways, so mindfully seeing, being very much open and attentive to our environments versus kind of shutting out. Mindfully listening to things that are around you, and then again, our breath, those deep inhales. And so one example to encompass all these things is naming things that you see within your environment. What are the sounds that you hear? What are the things that you're maybe tasting, or if you're eating, for example, or just breathing in that air? So tuning into all our senses when possible. And so I gave the idea of, walking day to day on the same sort of commute or way. And so one thing I might mention is that I was very much on autopilot, that I, didn't really tune in to what's kind of around me. And so being on autopilot is characterized by not fully tuning in, or when we jump to idea to idea, and usually end up sort of in a place that doesn't serve us well. And so when I talk about focusing our attention with intention, it's really getting off of the autopilot or the automaticity. It's kind of taking a step back and really looking what's around us or what's going on, versus doing things without thought. And so when we take ourselves off of the autopilot, we might notice our thoughts a little bit more, and the pattern that they follow, but really without judgment, without that next step. It separates the sort of responses to maybe a slower state of acknowledging them, noticing them, and creating a different plan, right? So the science of meditation around turning off of autopilot as one way is that meditation can in fact increase our sort of alpha waves in the brain, and so has a profound effect on our bodies, and it is less reactive to the automatic nervous system. So talking about that neuroplasticity, creating new pathways in our brain of new ways that we can react or tune in. So anything you think or do can in fact change your brain. And so the example that's highlighted is when an individual was in fact engaging in meditative practices. There's sort of the baseline response on the left, and on the right hand side of the image, there's far more illuminated pieces within our brain that is all encompassing, is that we're able to maybe tune in a little bit more, create a calmer state, offer ideas around the thoughts without kind of reacting. And so it's way more effective in identifying our uncomfortable feelings, of taking a step back. So it might be helpful when getting used to uncomfortable feelings or emotions or cravings. And so it's encouraging you to turn towards and name it versus running away from it or the alternative. And so accepting what's kind of going on to help with our emotional regulation and our impulse control. So those are additional factors around the meditation piece. Okay, so I'm just going to check the time because I want to be mindful. All right, so social connection. So when we talk about social connection, human beings are social. We like connecting with others, and so we need to talk with one another, to cry, to laugh, and disagree with. And so having relationships help us understand ourselves a little bit better, and really shapes who we are and who we become. And so with that said, it also helps decrease feelings of isolation and increase a sense of community. And so I recognize through this time that social interaction, because of the social distancing, can be very challenging. And so I'm encouraging you to offer ways of connecting in different ways, whether it's FaceTime or Zoom or different sort of opportunities to visually be able to see loved ones or friends, or emails, or had kind of going back old school, pen and paper. I'd sent a piece of mail the other day to an individual, and it just sparked, you know, just other meanings and things of excitement of getting mail. And then so offering the emotional and social release in different ways. And so oftentimes I have people say, Val, you know, I don't have any close friends right now. Is that they might still be in fact in a behavior that doesn't serve them, or I'm trying to separate and disconnect, and so that can be really isolating in when we're first in recovery. However, it's an opportunity to reconnect with healthy relationships, finding folks that have the same morals, values, and beliefs and goals that you might. And so you might feel like a deck out of water, but be aware that that's completely normal, and that over time you'll gain comfort in social situations without needing to use or engage in that behavior. So part of it is engaging in a healthy relationship with ourselves internally, before being able, or not even before, but as a way to aid and help with other social interactions. And so just naming, I deserve to be happy, I deserve to be in a healthy relationship, highlighting what you need and what you would like and desire. Okay, so part of it, in considering how to engage in healthy, safe, and supportive relationships or social interactions, is identifying personal boundaries. And so personal boundaries might be physical, emotional, mental, and in terms of protecting ourselves from being manipulated or used or violated or taken advantage of, so on and so forth. So it might be in terms of individual thoughts, it might be beliefs, opinions based on past experiences, family, religion, society, sort of the list goes on. But our perception of boundaries, it can be shifted depending on certain circumstances. And so how do we create boundaries or relationships when we might not have that idea? And so in terms of establishing, knowing that you have the right to personal boundaries, recognizing that other people's needs and feelings are not more important than your own, is that you have the right to care for yourself first and foremost. Learning to say no, and this can be so difficult, because when we go back to being social beings and wanting our needs met, we also want to support others, right? And trusting and believing yourself is one, or some ways that you can establish boundaries. And so some signs around unhealthy boundaries or behaviors is going against your own personal values in order to please others. Something doesn't sit right, doing that personal scan, that tightness in our belly or in our stomach of, why are we having that response? Is it because we're going against something that doesn't fit with our values or our needs? Taking or giving as much as you can for the sake of taking or giving, or expecting others to fulfill your needs automatically without thought. Feeling bad or guilty when saying no, not speaking up when you're treated poorly, or being able to advocate for ourselves. Falling in love with someone that you barely know, or who reaches out to you. And so also, with that said, accepting advances, whether it's touching, sex, or experiences that you don't in fact want. And so encouraging you to kind of think about, what boundaries or what limitations might I want in a relationship in order for it to be healthy, supportive, and successful. And so oftentimes addiction might minimize healthy personal boundaries, and it is your right and responsibility to make good boundaries for yourself in order to identify our own limits. And so maybe part of the process is creating a sense of assertiveness, of being able to say no, and avoiding uncomfortable places or people or situations that might challenge your boundaries. So, the idea of having, going against your personal values in order to please others, that you might know internally that you might not want to be at a certain place, but kind of fulfilling that because it serves someone else. Right. So emotional health. Our emotional health, again, a spectrum of emotions that might present. So both emotional and spiritual needs are about connecting with ourselves and the powers outside of ourselves. And so for some, being spiritual means participating in religion. Being spiritual as in, connecting with nature or taking in what's around you. And so helping us identify our emotions can be a big piece of that, can better help us understand how to cope with kind of what's going on, how to identify what those mean, what those look like, and really help support when we talk about our triggers or high risk situations around lapse or relapse of naming, I was feeling really overwhelmed, and here are the reasons why. And when I feel overwhelmed, I might increase the need to want to escape. And so it offers an opportunity to incorporate new healthy behaviors or healthy coping when we know what was kind of going on in navigating and reflecting. All right. So emotional self-care. One way or some ways might be to stay in contact with important people in your life, to practice ways that you can love yourself, whether it's engaging in positive affirmations every day, remembering to play, thinking about the last time that you might have engaged in something that really fulfilled and made you feel good, recognizing the emotional release is okay to cry, and finding things that make you laugh. So those might be some helpful tips of identifying ways that we can emotionally self-regulate or take care of ourselves and connecting with our spiritual self, but also our emotional. Okay, so creating a self-care plan. I had talked about at the beginning, or maybe not the beginning, the middle of the presentation, of looking at ways to better manage and care for ourselves, and taking some models of self-care. So maybe things that were discussed in the different slides. And so there is a handout around my own self-care plan, and encouraging you to create your own journey compass or map or plan in those different areas. Or if there's other things that are super important, add that to the quadrant or add that to the sheet of paper, around the movement, around the mindfulness, around the connection, and emotional impacts. So this is just an opportunity to create your own, to take away things that you've learned today and practice them and implement them. And so as we come to an end, I thought it was fitting to put a quote by Gandhi around the mindfulness, self-care, and connection. So happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. So again, coming full circle around the interconnection between those pieces. And so if we think of a meditation, again, meditation doesn't have to be anything massive. It could just be, I have a goal to attend SIS for the day. It's an intention. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I be free. It's those affirmations, the inner self. So thank you for taking the time this morning. My hope is that you can kind of implement some strategies to increase your well-being through this time, and to connect with ourselves a little bit differently than maybe when we're used to day by day. So turning off autopilot, looking within, and creating a plan of overall sense of well-being in various life areas. Thanks again, and wish you well.